Welcome to our deep dive into the captivating world of War, the classic card game that's been frustrating and delighting players for generations.
Let's start with a quick refresher on the rules. 2 players, 1 standard deck, split equally. Each round, players flip their top card. Highest card wins both. Winning cards go to the bottom of the winner's deck, and here's the kicker: they must be placed randomly. This seemingly small detail dramatically affects the statistics of the game if not enforced. In case of a tie, it's war. Players place 2 cards face down, or 3 in some variations, and 1 face up. Highest face-up card takes all. Still tied? Repeat until we have a winner. The game ends when one player captures all the cards.
Now let's crunch some numbers. We simulated 500,000 games to analyze how long war typically lasts. Take a look at this graph. The x-axis shows the number of rounds, and the y-axis shows the percentage of games ending after that many rounds. Some fascinating findings. The shortest game? A mere 7 rounds. The longest marathon? An eye-watering 4,045 rounds. On average, games last about 350 rounds. Most commonly, games wrap up between 100 to 130 rounds. A word of caution: the minimum and maximum figures tend to change depending on the number of games simulated. The average and most popular number of turns are consistent. To explore all possible outcomes, we would need to simulate 4.6 times 10 to the power of 49 games. That would take much more time than the age of the universe.
You might be thinking, war feels like it lasts forever. Our stats say otherwise. Look at the accumulated graph. In fact, 78% of games end within 500 rounds. The game's simplicity might be why it feels longer. There's no skill involved, just the whims of chance. You can also see that the chance of a game lasting more than 1,500 rounds is very slim. Let's talk war frequency. Our simulations show wars happen about 5.9% of the time, remarkably close to the theoretical 3 divided by 51. The most consecutive wars we observed? A whopping 7.
Now let's look at the variation where, in a war, 3 cards are placed face down. The number of rounds tends to be shorter, which is expected. However, the interesting part is that even numbers of rounds are much more common than odd ones. A whopping 66.6% of games end after an even number of rounds. This can be explained by the fact that each player starts with 26 cards. If there are no wars and one player wins every hand, the game will last 26 rounds. For every round that one player loses, he must win an additional round to offset the loss, still resulting in an even number of rounds. When a delta of 1 war occurs, the player gains 5 cards, so the number of rounds becomes 21 plus 1 equal 22, still even. When a delta of 2 wars occur, the number of rounds becomes 16 plus 2 equal 18, again even. So, do we always get an even number of rounds? Not necessarily. Edge cases where a player doesn't have enough cards during a war can result in odd numbers of rounds. Fascinatingly, this even round bias resurfaces in any variation where an odd number of cards are placed face down during wars. It's a perfect example of how small rule changes can have significant impacts on game statistics. So why don't we see this phenomenon when 2 cards are face down? When no war happens, or each player wins the same number of wars, the number of rounds is even. When 1 war occurs, the player gains 4 cards, so the number of rounds becomes 22 plus 1 equal 23, odd number. When 2 wars occur, the player gains 8 cards, so the number of rounds becomes 18 plus 2 equal 20, even again. Overall, we see that even numbers of rounds arise as often as odd numbers.
Now let's look at the variation where, in a war, 5 cards are placed face down. Not surprisingly, the game wraps up much faster, perfect for those times when you are short on time. But wait, there's more. Ever wondered what would happen if we doubled or even quadrupled the deck size? Brace yourselves. With 2 decks, and especially with 4, the number of rounds skyrockets. You might find yourself genuinely asking, will this game ever end? Thanks for diving into the statistics of war with us. But we're not done yet. The real strategizing is just beginning. In Part 2, we'll reveal how to assess your hand and calculate your winning odds before the first card is played. You'll learn powerful formulas so you could impress your friends or maybe even win a quick friendly bet. Hit that subscribe button and continue straight into Part 2.